Jake Martinez sat in the corner of the ship's recreation room, carefully running his knife along a piece of ironwood. The shavings curled and fell to the floor around his feet. He had been working on this spear for 3 weeks now, ever since the Aurora's edge left Earth's orbit. The other humans on the ship mostly ignored his hobby. They were too busy studying alien technology and trying to impress their new coalition partners. Jake didn't mind. He found peace in the simple act of shaping wood with his hands. A sharp laugh broke his concentration. Commander Veltar, the tall Zephyrian officer, stood nearby with 2 of his fellow aliens. His skin had a blue-gray color that shifted like oil on water, and his forearms moved in gestures that Jake had learned meant amusement. "Look at the human playing with sticks," Veltar said to his companions. His voice came through the translation device as smooth and cold. "While we travel between stars, he makes toys from dead plants." Dr. Kixana, the Vortac science officer, approached Jake's corner. Her crystalline body caught the ship's lights and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. Each step she took made a sound like wind chimes. "Fascinating," she said, but her tone made it clear she found nothing fascinating about it. The human species still clings to primitive behaviors. You shape wood with metal tools when you could simply program matter to take any form you desire. Jake kept working on his spear. He had learned early in the mission that arguing with the aliens only made things worse. They saw humans as the newest and least advanced members of the coalition. Every human action was watched and judged. "It's called craftsmanship," said Lisa Chen from across the room. She looked up from her datapad where she had been studying Zephyrian engineering reports. "Humans value the process of making things by hand." Veltar's laugh grew louder. "Craftsmanship? You mean inefficiency? My weapon can cut through starship hulls. His wooden stick cannot even cut through my uniform." The Klaxon engineer Buzzak clicked his mandibles in what Jake had learned was their version of laughter. His insect-like head turned toward Jake with compound eyes that reflected the room's light. "Perhaps the human believes his stick has magical properties," Buzzak said. "Many primitive species think their tools contain spirits or power." Jake felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice steady. "It's not about magic. It's about understanding materials, about working with natural patterns and strengths." "Natural patterns," Dr. Kixana repeated. She moved closer, her crystalline form casting dancing lights. "You mean random biological processes? We have moved beyond such limitations. Our tools are designed by pure mathematics and quantum mechanics." Captain Pete Sullivan entered the recreation room, his human face showing the stress of commanding a mixed-species crew. Behind him walked Chief Engineer Ron Harper and Dr. Susan Blake, the mission's xenoarchaeologist. "What's all the noise about?" Pete asked. Veltar gestured toward Jake with all 4 arms. "We were discussing the fascinating contrast between evolved and primitive toolmaking. The human creates weapons from organic waste while we shape energy itself into cutting implements." To prove his point, Veltar drew his energy blade. It hummed to life, casting a blue glow across the room. The blade was thin as paper but could cut through almost any known material. "This blade vibrates at frequencies that disrupt molecular bonds," Veltar explained. "It represents thousands of years of Zephyrian scientific advancement." Dr. Blake looked interested despite the tension in the room. "That's impressive technology, Commander. But Jake's approach has its own merits. Traditional craftsmanship connects us to our history and teaches us about material properties in ways that pure technology cannot." Buzzak's mandibles clicked again. "History is the past. We live in the present and build the future. Why would anyone choose inferior methods when superior ones exist?" Jake finally looked up from his work. The spear was nearly finished, its surface smooth and the point sharp. The ironwood had a rich brown color with darker streaks running through it. "Because sometimes old ways know things, new ways have forgotten," Jake said quietly. The aliens exchanged looks that needed no translation. They thought he was foolish. Ron Harper tried to change the subject. "How much longer until we reach the target system?" 2 days, Pete answered. "The advanced scouts found something big on Kepler 442c, an ancient derelict ship, completely unknown design." This got everyone's attention. First contact with new alien technology was always exciting, especially for the coalition scientists. "Any idea what kind of weapons it might have?" Veltar asked. "The ship appears to be dead," Pete said. "No energy signatures, no active systems. But the hull material is something we've never seen before. The scouts couldn't get any readings through it." Dr. Kixana's crystalline body brightened with interest. Unknown materials often provide breakthrough discoveries. My molecular analysis equipment should be able to identify its composition quickly. My cutting tools can open any hull, Veltar added. Zephyrian military technology has never met a barrier it could not breach. Jake continued working on his spear, listening to the aliens discuss their plans. They spoke with the confidence of people who had never encountered a problem their technology could not solve. Lisa Chen moved to sit beside Jake. She was one of the few humans who didn't seem embarrassed by his traditional hobbies. Don't let them get to you, she said quietly. They just don't understand why anyone would choose a harder way of doing things. Jake tested the balance of his spear, feeling how the weight distributed along its length. Maybe the harder way teaches you something the easier way doesn't. Like what? Jake thought for a moment. Like how materials want to behave. Wood has grain patterns, natural strengths, and weaknesses. When you work with your hands, you learn to feel these things. You start to understand how everything in nature follows certain rules. And you think that matters on a spaceship surrounded by alien technology? Jake smiled and continued polishing his spear. I guess we'll find out. The aliens had moved on to discussing the technical aspects of the coming mission. Their voices filled the room with talk of energy frequencies, molecular structures, and quantum field manipulation. It was impressive knowledge, Jake had to admit, but as he put the finishing touches on his wooden spear, Jake felt something the aliens' technology could never give him. He felt connected to every human who had ever shaped wood with their hands, from the first person to sharpen a stick to the master craftsman who had taught him these skills. The spear was simple, made from a tree that had grown on Earth for over 100 years before Jake cut it down. No energy fields, no quantum mechanics, no advanced materials. Just wood shaped by human hands using techniques thousands of years old. Jake had no idea that in 2 days, his primitive wooden spear would prove more valuable than all the aliens' advanced technology combined. The Aurora's edge dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that Jake felt through the deck plates. He was in his quarters, giving his finished spear a final inspection when the ship's announcement system crackled to life. All personnel to stations. We have arrived at Kepler 442c. Jake secured his spear in the wall mount he had installed and made his way to the observation deck. The planet hung before them like a brown marble streaked with red clouds. It looked dead and unwelcoming, but it wasn't the planet that had everyone excited. Floating in a slow orbit was something that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The derelict ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Aurora's edge. Its hull had a strange, organic appearance, as if it had been grown rather than built. Curved sections flowed into each other without visible seams or joints. The surface was dark gray with what looked like intricate patterns etched across every visible section. Magnificent, Dr. Kixana breathed, her crystalline body pulsing with excitement. The geometric complexity is unlike anything in Coalition databases. Commander Veltar studied the vessel through enhanced viewing screens. No energy signatures at all. Whatever powered this ship died long ago. Captain Sullivan joined them at the viewing wall. The advanced scouts were right. This predates anything we've ever found. Initial estimates put it at over 5 million years old. Dr. Susan Blake was taking detailed photographs with her equipment. The hull patterns are extraordinary. Look at the way they spiral and branch. It's almost like... Like what? Ron Harper asked. Susan frowned, studying her images. I'm not sure yet. Something familiar about the mathematical relationships. Jake pressed closer to the viewing wall. The patterns did look familiar, though he couldn't place why. They reminded him of something he had seen before, something natural. Well, whatever it is, we'll know more once we get inside, Veltar said confidently. My cutting equipment will open that hull like a tin can. The next few hours were spent in careful approach and docking procedures. The alien ship had no obvious airlocks or entry points, so the crew had to choose a location and prepare to cut their way in. They gathered in the Aurora's Edge's main cargo bay, which had been converted into a staging area. Jake stood with the other humans while the Coalition members prepared their equipment. Veltar's cutting array was an impressive sight. Multiple energy projectors arranged in a precise pattern, each one humming with barely contained power. The blue energy field they created could slice through most known materials like butter. Stand back, everyone, Veltar announced. Zephyrian military technology at work. The energy cutters engaged with a sound like screaming wind. Blue fire played across the ancient hull, casting strange shadows in the cargo bay. Everyone watched expectantly. Nothing happened. The energy washed over the hull surface without leaving so much as a scorch mark. The ancient pattern seemed to absorb the blue light and scatter it harmlessly. Veltar's confidence faltered. He adjusted the frequency settings and increased the power. The cutters roared louder, drawing more energy from the ship's reactors. Still nothing. Impossible, Veltar muttered. His forearms worked frantically at the control panel. These cutters can breach Coalition battleship armor. Dr. Kixana stepped forward with her molecular disruptor array. The Vortok technology worked differently than Zephyrian cutters, targeting the atomic bonds that held matter together. Perhaps a more subtle approach, she said, activating her equipment. The disruptor field created no visible effect, but Jake could feel it as a tingling in his teeth. The ancient hull remained completely unchanged. "This is fascinating," Dr. Kixana said, though she sounded more frustrated than fascinated. "The material is not reflecting or absorbing our energy. It appears to be completely immune to molecular disruption." Buzzek brought up his plasma cannon next. The Klaxon weapon was designed for demolition work, using superheated plasma to melt through obstacles. The plasma struck the hull with tremendous heat and light. When the glare faded, the ancient surface looked exactly the same as before. "How is this possible?" Ron Harper asked. "We're hitting it with 3 different types of advanced technology." Captain Sullivan looked worried. "Maybe we need to go back for heavier equipment. The fleet has some experimental weapons that might work." "That would take weeks," Dr. Blake protested. "This discovery is too important to delay. There has to be another way." Jake found himself studying the hull patterns more closely while the others argued about what to try next. The flowing lines and spiraling shapes definitely reminded him of something from Earth. He reached out without thinking and placed his palm against the ancient surface. It felt warm, which surprised him. Everything else on the derelict ship was cold as space. "The human is contaminating the surface," Buzzek clicked in annoyance. Jake pulled his hand back quickly, but not before noticing something odd. Where his skin had touched the hull, the pattern seemed to have shifted slightly. It was probably just his imagination. Lisa Chen noticed his thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" "These patterns," Jake said quietly. "They look like growth rings. Growth rings in trees. When you cut down a tree, you can see rings in the wood that show how it grew over time. These patterns have the same kind of mathematical relationships." Dr. Blake overheard them. "Growth rings? That's an interesting observation. Natural growth patterns do follow specific mathematical rules." Veltar was still struggling with his cutting equipment. "Mathematical rules are irrelevant if we cannot breach the hull." "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," Jake said. Everyone turned to look at him. "We're treating this like a normal spaceship, trying to cut through armor. But what if it's not armor? What if it's more like what?" Captain Sullivan asked. Jake thought about the warm feeling under his palm, about patterns that looked like natural growth. Like a living thing, or something that used to be alive. The aliens exchanged skeptical glances. Dr. Kixana's crystalline form flickered. With what Jake had learned was amusement. "Biological. Spaceships are theoretically possible," she said in a patronizing tone, "but they would still be made of matter that responds to energy manipulation. Unless they evolved defenses against energy weapons," Jake suggested. Veltar laughed harshly. "You think this ancient ship was designed to resist technology that didn't exist when it was built?" "Maybe not our specific technology," Jake said. "But what if the builders knew that advanced civilizations would rely on energy weapons? What if they designed their ships to be vulnerable only to something else?" "Like what?" Ron Harper asked. Jake thought about his spear sitting in his quarters, about wood that had grown following natural patterns, shaped by human hands using ancient techniques, like something that works with natural forces instead of against them. The aliens dismissed this idea immediately, but Dr. Blake looked thoughtful. She studied her photographs of the hull patterns with new interest. "The mathematical relationships are very similar to natural growth patterns," she admitted. "Fibonacci sequences, golden ratios, fractal structures, primitive biological processes," Dr. Kixana said dismissively. "We have evolved beyond such limitations." But Jake was thinking about trees that grew following mathematical rules older than civilization. About wooden tools that worked with natural grain instead of against it. About ancient knowledge that maybe wasn't as primitive as everyone thought. As the others continued their futile attempts to breach the hull, Jake began to form a crazy idea. It was probably wrong, but something about this ancient ship felt familiar in a way that the aliens' technology never would. Tonight, when the others were sleeping, he would test his theory. He would bring his wooden spear to the hull and see if natural materials could succeed where advanced technology had failed. After all, what did he have to lose except the mockery of aliens who were already convinced he was primitive? Jake waited until the night cycle began before making his move. The Aurora's edge ran on standard Earth time, and most of the crew would be asleep for the next 6 hours. He slipped out of his quarters carrying his wooden spear, moving quietly through the dimmed corridors. The cargo bay was empty except for the abandoned cutting equipment. The alien tools sat silent and useless, their operators having given up in frustration hours ago. Beyond the airlock, the ancient hull waited in the cold vacuum of space. Jake put on his environmental suit and cycled through the airlock. The derelict ship loomed before him, its strange patterns barely visible in the Aurora's edge's exterior lights. He activated his suit's magnetic boots and walked carefully across the hull surface until he reached the area where the others had tried to cut through. The ancient material showed no sign of damage from the energy weapons that had struck it. Jake knelt down and studied the patterns more closely. Up close, they were even more beautiful and complex. Spirals within spirals, branching lines that split and rejoined in mathematical precision. It reminded him of the grain patterns in a piece of burled wood, or the way rivers carved channels through landscape over thousands of years. He reached out and touched the surface through his suit's gloves. Even through the thick material, he could feel that strange warmth he had noticed earlier. Jake unsecured his spear from his tool belt. The ironwood looked simple and crude compared to the sophisticated patterns on the hull, but something about it felt right in this place. He held the spear near the surface and immediately felt a vibration through the wood. It was subtle, like the feeling you got when you held a tuning fork, but definitely there. Moving slowly, Jake traced the spear along different parts of the pattern. The vibration changed as he moved, sometimes growing stronger, sometimes fading almost to nothing. It was as if the wood was responding to something in the ancient material. After an hour of careful exploration, Jake found a spot where the vibration was strongest. The hull pattern here formed a perfect spiral, like a nautilus shell or the center of a sunflower. When he held his spear over this spot, the wood hummed with resonance. Taking a deep breath, Jake pressed the spear's point against the center of the spiral. The ancient hull began to glow. Light spread outward from the contact point in rippling waves, following the etched patterns like water flowing through channels. The glow was warm and golden, nothing like the harsh blue of the Zephyrian energy weapons. Jake felt the spear sink slightly into the hull material, not cutting or melting but sinking as if the solid surface had become soft as clay. He pressed a little harder and the spear went deeper. Around the penetration point, the hull began to part. The edges curled back like flower petals, revealing darkness beyond. The opening grew larger as Jake held his spear steady, until there was a hole large enough for a person to crawl through. Jake stared in amazement. His simple wooden spear had accomplished what the most advanced coalition technology could not. The ancient ship had opened for him like it recognized something familiar. "What the hell are you doing out here?" Jake spun around to see Captain Sullivan floating outside the airlock in his own environmental suit. The captain's face was visible through his helmet visor, showing a mixture of anger and confusion. "Captain, I can explain. You better explain fast, Martinez. You're out here alone in violation of safety protocols and—" Pete stopped talking as he saw the hole in the hull. "How did you do that?" Jake held up his spear. "I think the ship recognizes natural materials." Pete's expression shifted from anger to amazement. "Your wooden stick did what 3 different energy weapons couldn't?" "It's not about the wood being better than their technology," Jake said quickly. "It's about being different. I think this ship was designed to resist energy-based attacks but respond to natural materials." Pete activated his comm system. "All senior staff to the cargo bay. We have a breakthrough." Within minutes, the cargo bay was full of people in environmental suits. The aliens crowded around the opening Jake had created, their various forms of amazement clear even through their helmets. Dr. Kiksana was scanning the edges of the hole with her instruments. "Impossible. The material has not been cut or melted. It has simply moved aside." Commander Veltar examined Jake's spear with obvious skepticism. You claim this piece of dead plant matter succeeded where Zephyrian military technology failed? I'm not claiming anything, Jake said. I'm just showing you what happened. Dr. Blake was taking photographs of the hull patterns around the opening. The way the material folded back follows the natural lines of the pattern. It's like the ship wanted to open once it recognized the right key. Keys are mechanical concepts, Buzak clicked dismissively. This is organic matter interacting with unknown technology, through quantum effects we do not understand. Lisa Chen floated near Jake, her voice full of wonder. How did you know to try this? Jake looked at the patterns spreading across the hull. The mathematics. These spirals and branches follow the same rules as natural growth. The golden ratio, Fibonacci sequences, fractal patterns, they're everywhere in nature. In shells, flowers, tree branches, even human DNA. Ron Harper was examining the opening structure. The edges are perfectly smooth. No stress fractures, no heat damage. It's like the material was designed to do this. Captain Sullivan made the decision. We're going in. Jake, since you opened it, you're with the first team. Flake, Chen, Harper, you're coming too. Captain, Veltar interjected. My combat training makes me the logical choice for an unknown environment. Your combat training didn't get us inside, Pete replied. Jake's wooden spear did. The first exploration team cycled through the airlock and approached the opening Jake had created. Portable lights revealed a corridor beyond, its walls covered with the same organic patterns as the exterior hull. Jake went first, still carrying his spear. As soon as he entered the ancient ship, he felt the difference. The air was stale but breathable, and there was gravity. Not artificial gravity like on modern ships, but real gravitational force generated somehow by the ship itself. The corridor walls pulsed with a faint light that followed their movement, as if the ship was waking up after millions of years of sleep. The patterns on the walls were even more complex than those outside, with branching networks that looked almost like neural pathways or root systems. This is incredible, Dr. Blake whispered. The entire ship appears to be one integrated organic system. They moved deeper into the vessel, following corridors that curved and branched like blood vessels. At every junction, Jake found he could determine the right path by holding his spear near the walls. The wood would vibrate when they faced the correct direction. How is that possible? Lisa asked. Jake was beginning to understand. I think this ship was grown, not built. And I think it's still partly alive. The wood responds because it recognizes something familiar. The mathematical patterns that govern all natural growth. They reached a large chamber at the ship's center. The walls here were covered with what looked like controls, but they were nothing like the mechanical or electronic interfaces on coalition ships. These were organic surfaces that responded to touch, with patterns that shifted and changed based on interaction. Ron Harper approached one of the control surfaces cautiously. When he touched it with his gloved hand, nothing happened. But when Jake held his wooden spear near it, the patterns began to glow and shift. The ship recognizes organic materials, Jake realized. Not just any organic materials, but ones that carry the natural mathematical patterns. Wood that grew following the same rules as the ship itself. Captain Sullivan spoke into his comm. Aurora's Edge, we're inside. The vessel appears to be some kind of biotechnological hybrid. Jake's unconventional approach seems to be the key to interfacing with it. Through the comm came Veltar's voice, grudging but clear. Request permission to join the exploration team. Denied, Pete replied. Your energy weapons might damage the ship's systems. This is a job for wooden spears, apparently. Jake smiled inside his helmet. For the first time since joining the mission, his traditional skills were being valued over advanced technology. The ancient ship had taught him something important. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. As the team began documenting their discoveries, Jake held his spear and marveled at how a simple piece of carved wood had succeeded, where the galaxy's most advanced technology had failed. The ancient ship revealed its secret slowly, like a flower opening to sunlight. Over the next few days, Jake found himself leading exploration teams deeper into the vessel, his wooden spear serving as both key and compass through the organic corridors. The ship was vast inside, much larger than it appeared from the outside. Chambers branched off from the main passages like cells in a living body. Each room had a different purpose, though their functions were unlike anything in Coalition databases. Dr. Blake documented everything with growing excitement. The walls weren't just decorated with natural patterns. They were alive or had been alive once. Microscopic analysis showed cellular structures, protein chains, and DNA-like molecular arrangements. "This isn't a ship," she announced during the daily briefing. "It's a living organism, or it was when it was active." Commander Veltar attended the meetings now, though he clearly struggled with accepting that his advanced weapons were useless here. "If it was alive, what killed it?" "Age, probably," Dr. Blake replied. "Our dating methods suggest it's been dead for over 3 million years. But the cellular structure is so well preserved that some systems still respond to the right stimuli." "Meaning Jake's spear," Lisa Chen added. Jake sat at the back of the briefing room, uncomfortable with all the attention. His wooden spear leaned against his chair, looking ordinary among all the high-tech equipment. "I don't understand why it works," he admitted. "I just know that when I hold the spear near the ship's systems, they respond." Dr. Kixana had been running analysis on samples Jake had collected using his spear. Her crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully as she shared her findings. The ship's material contains resonance frequencies that match natural growth patterns. Wood, bone, shell, coral, any organic material that formed following mathematical rules found in nature. The spear acts as a tuning fork, creating harmonic vibrations that activate dormant systems. Ron Harper looked confused. But why would the builders design it that way? Why not use normal controls? The answer came when they discovered the ship's data storage system. It wasn't electronic or quantum-based like Coalition technology. Instead, information was stored in what looked like crystallized tree rings, layer upon layer of organic memory that could only be accessed through natural resonance. Jake's spear unlocked the first data crystal, and suddenly the chamber walls came alive with images. Not holographic projections, but actual bioluminescent displays growing from the living surfaces. The images showed the ship's builders, and they were unlike any species in the Coalition database. They looked almost plant-like, with bodies that seemed grown rather than evolved. Their technology was entirely biological. Ships that were cultivated like gardens, tools that were bred rather than manufactured, weapons that grew on trees. "Incredible," Captain Sullivan breathed. "An entire civilization based on biological technology." The data crystals told a remarkable story. The builders, who called themselves the Shapers, had once encountered other spacefaring civilizations. Most of these civilizations, like the Coalition, had developed along technological paths: metal ships, energy weapons, artificial intelligence. The Shapers found that their biotechnology was often superior to mechanical alternatives. Their ships could heal damage, their tools could adapt to new situations, their weapons could evolve to counter new threats. But they faced a problem. "Look at this," Dr. Blake said, pointing to a new set of images. They encountered raiders, pirates who attacked their ships. The Shapers were peaceful, but they needed to defend themselves. The images showed battles between bioships and mechanical ones. The Shapers usually won because their living vessels could adapt faster than programmed systems could respond. But the Shapers were wise. They realized that as civilizations became more advanced, they became more dependent on technology and more removed from natural processes. Advanced species used energy weapons, force fields, and artificial systems almost exclusively. So the Shapers designed their ships to be nearly invulnerable to technological attacks while remaining responsive to natural, organic interfaces. Their hulls could absorb and deflect energy weapons. Their systems would only activate for beings who maintained connections to natural materials and traditional skills. It was a test, Jake realized. The ship only opens for species that haven't completely abandoned their natural origins. The implications hit everyone at the same time. The Coalition races, Zephyrians, Vortakans, Klaxons, had all evolved beyond dependence on organic materials. They had replaced natural processes with artificial ones, traditional skills with technological solutions. Only humans still maintained connections to their primitive past. Only humans still carved wood and worked with natural materials as hobbies and traditions. Buzzak's mandibles clicked in what Jake now recognized as distress. "You are saying that our technological advancement has made us inferior?" "Not inferior," Jake said carefully. "Just different. You've gained a lot by embracing technology, but you've also lost some things." The data crystals revealed more secrets as Jake activated them one by one with his spear. The Shapers had created a vast network of these bioships, each one containing knowledge and technology that could only be accessed by species that maintained natural connections. They had scattered them throughout the galaxy as gifts for any civilization, wise enough to value both progress and tradition. Most would never be found or opened. Advanced species would dismiss them as primitive, while truly primitive species would lack the means to reach them. But occasionally, a species would find the balance. They would advance far enough to travel between stars while still maintaining their connection to natural processes and traditional knowledge. The Shapers were looking for species like humans, Dr. Blake said in wonder. Civilizations that could combine technological advancement with respect for natural wisdom. Commander Veltar had been quiet during the revelations. His forearms folded in a posture Jake had learned meant deep thought. Finally, he spoke. I owe you an apology, Jake Martinez. I mocked your wooden spear and called you primitive. But your primitive tool has given us access to knowledge and technology beyond our current understanding. Dr. Kixana's crystalline form flickered with what Jake now recognized as embarrassment. I too dismissed your traditional craftsmanship as evolutionary regression. Instead, it appears to be the key to evolutionary advancement. The data crystals contained star maps, showing the locations of other Shaper vessels throughout the galaxy. They held biological technologies that could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, and environmental restoration. Most importantly, they contained knowledge of how to blend organic and technological approaches for maximum effectiveness. Jake looked at his simple wooden spear with new understanding. It wasn't just a carved piece of wood. It was a bridge between humanity's past and its future, a tool that connected ancient wisdom with cosmic knowledge. Captain Sullivan made the decision that would change everything. We're not just taking samples back to Earth, we're taking this entire ship. And Jake Martinez is going to lead the team that learns how to interface with Shaper technology. But Captain, Lisa Chen protested, Jake's not a scientist or an engineer. Pete smiled. No. But he's the only one whose wooden spear can unlock secrets that the most advanced technology in the galaxy cannot access. Sometimes the most important qualification isn't what you know. It's what you haven't forgotten. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The aliens who had mocked his primitive hobby now looked to him for guidance into a new era of biotechnological integration. His wooden spear had cut through more than alien alloy. It had cut through assumptions about progress and evolution, revealing that sometimes moving forward meant remembering where you came from. 3 months after the discovery of the Shaper vessel, the Aurora's Edge returned to Coalition space, pulling the ancient bioship behind it. News of Jake's breakthrough had spread throughout the galaxy, changing everything about how the Coalition viewed technology and progress. Jake stood in what had become known as the Integration Lab, a new facility built specifically to study Shaper biotechnology. His wooden spear hung in a place of honor on the wall, no longer a source of mockery but a symbol of the breakthrough that had opened an entirely new field of science. The lab buzzed with activity as researchers from dozens of species worked to understand how biological and technological systems could be combined. At the center of it all, Jake found himself in a position he had never expected. Director of Biotechnical Integration, the first human to hold such a senior position in the Coalition Science Division. Commander Veltar entered the lab carrying a piece of carved wood. His forearms moved awkwardly as he tried to copy the motions Jake had taught him the previous week. I'm still having difficulty with the grain patterns, Veltar admitted, holding up his attempt at carving. Zephyrian physiology was not designed for this type of fine motor control. Jake examined the carving with the patience of a teacher. You're fighting the wood instead of working with it. Remember, the grain wants to split in certain directions. Follow those lines instead of forcing your own pattern. It was a strange sight, an advanced alien warrior taking wood carving lessons from a human. But it had become common throughout the Coalition. The discovery of Shaper technology had revealed that connecting with natural processes wasn't primitive behavior, but advanced wisdom that most species had lost. Dr. Blake approached with her latest findings. Jake, we've successfully interfaced the Shaper navigation system with our quantum computers. The bioship's ability to adapt routes in real time combined with our computational power has reduced travel time between systems by 30%. This was the kind of breakthrough happening daily. Coalition technology enhanced by Shaper biosystems was proving superior to either approach alone: ships that could heal themselves, weapons that adapted to new threats, computers that could grow and evolve. The possibilities seemed endless, but all of it required someone who could interface with the organic systems using natural materials and traditional techniques. Lisa Chen had become Jake's assistant, learning wood carving and other traditional human crafts so she could help activate different Shaper systems. She was currently working with a team of Vortex scientists to develop new medical technologies based on Shaper healing protocols. The bioregeneration chambers are incredible, Lisa reported. They can regrow lost limbs, cure genetic diseases, even reverse aging to some extent. But they only respond to organic interfaces. No artificial materials work at all. Ron Harper had been promoted to Chief of Hybrid Engineering, leading efforts to integrate Shaper biotechnology with Coalition mechanical systems. His latest project was a new class of starship that combined the best of both approaches. The biohull can adapt to different environments automatically, Ron explained to a group of visiting admirals. It becomes more radiation-resistant near stars, develops better armor when entering combat zones, even grows navigation sensors when exploring unknown space. But it requires organic control interfaces to function properly. Captain Sullivan, now Admiral Sullivan, oversaw the entire integration program. He had become one of the strongest advocates for preserving traditional knowledge and skills throughout the Coalition. "We made a mistake," he said during a conference of Coalition leaders. "We assumed that technological advancement meant abandoning natural processes. The Shapers showed us that true advancement comes from combining both approaches. The changes weren't just technological. The discovery had sparked a renaissance of interest in traditional crafts and skills throughout the galaxy. Species that had abandoned their natural heritage began rediscovering forgotten knowledge. Dr. Kixana had established a Vortac crystal growing program based on ancient Vortac techniques that had been dismissed as primitive for thousands of years. The traditionally grown crystals interfaced with Shaper systems far better than artificially manufactured ones. Buzak had become fascinated with the mathematical patterns found in natural structures. His latest research involved growing klaxon hive structures using principles learned from studying tree growth and coral formation. Even the Coalition military had embraced the new paradigm. Weapons that combined energy projectors with bioadaptive targeting systems were proving devastatingly effective against traditional defenses. Ships with biohulls could heal battle damage and adapt their armor in real time. But the most important changes were happening at a deeper level. The Coalition had always been a loose alliance of species who barely tolerated each other's differences. Now they were learning to value what each species brought to the collective knowledge pool. Jake found himself at the center of a new cultural movement. Humans were no longer seen as the newest and least advanced Coalition members. Instead, they were recognized as the species that had maintained the crucial balance between technological progress and natural wisdom. The Shaper data crystals had revealed the locations of 17 other bioships scattered throughout the galaxy. Each required someone with traditional skills to activate and explore. Jake was training teams of humans and sympathetic aliens to serve as bioship interface specialists. Amy Rodriguez, a young engineer from Earth, had just returned from activating a Shaper vessel in the Centauri system. Her report showed how much the program had accomplished. The ship contained agricultural biotechnology that can increase crop yields by 400% while actually improving soil quality, Amy announced. It also had atmospheric processors that can terraform dead worlds using living systems that adapt to local conditions. The implications were staggering. The Coalition could expand into previously uninhabitable star systems, solve food shortages, and repair environmental damage using Shaper biotechnology. But all of it depended on maintaining the skills and knowledge that advanced civilizations usually abandoned. Jake stood before the viewing wall in his lab, looking out at the first hybrid bioship under construction. Its hull pulsed with organic patterns while quantum computers calculated hyperspace jump coordinates. Traditional woodcarving tools sat beside molecular assemblers. Ancient techniques worked alongside cutting-edge science. Beltar joined him at the viewing wall, his latest woodcarving attempt looking much better than his first efforts. "I've been thinking about what the Shapers were really trying to teach us," Veltar said. "They could have left purely technological gifts, Instead, they created tests that required wisdom as well as advancement. What kind of wisdom? Jake asked. The wisdom to know that progress doesn't always mean discarding the past, that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones, that advancement without understanding leads to dead ends. Jake nodded, thinking about his wooden spear and how it had opened doors that energy weapons could not touch. Maybe that's why they scattered so many ships throughout the galaxy. They wanted to make sure that when species were ready to combine technology with traditional wisdom, the knowledge would be waiting for them. The two of them watched as construction crews, human carpenters working alongside alien engineers, continued building humanity's future. It was a future that honored both progress and tradition, technology and craftsmanship, advancement and wisdom. Jake's simple wooden spear had taught the galaxy that moving forward sometimes meant remembering where you came from, and in the process, it had elevated humanity from junior members of the coalition to teachers of the most important lesson in the universe. That true strength comes from knowing when to use advanced technology and when to trust in ancient wisdom. As Jake returned to his work training the next generation of bioship interface specialists, he carried with him the satisfaction of knowing that his primitive hobby had become the key to the galaxy's future. Sometimes the most advanced tool was a simple piece of carved wood in the hands of someone who understood that progress and tradition weren't opposites. They were partners in the dance of true advancement. The wooden spear that had once been mocked now pointed the way to a future where the wisdom of the past guided the technology of tomorrow, and Jake Martinez, traditional craftsman turned director of biotechnical integration, had become living proof that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs came from the simplest tools.